Despite what a lot of Naruto fans would have you believe, powerful jutsus have always been an essential aspect of the Naruto power system, and no matter how many times you watch the Rock Lee vs Gaara fight, not using jutsus does not make you more of a real ninja. The most touted shinobi in the verse are jutsu specialists, whether it's Kakashi, master of 1,000 jutsu, Hiruzen the professor, or Itachi the God of Genjutsu. These are all some of the most talented and decorated shinobi. However, there is one specific character that I believe doesn't get his flowers for having one of the deepest and widest bags in the series, that being the Toad Sage Jiraiya. Jiraiya has had a phenomenal run of jutsu showcases throughout the manga, which is why today I want to take a deep dive into Jiraiya's jutsu arsenal to show exactly why it's one of the most versatile in the series. But before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe and become a channel member, I'd greatly appreciate it. Now, to start things off, I think it makes the most sense to start with the most iconic aspect of his character, that being his summons. Jiraiya being a Toad Sage obviously implies that he has made a contract with Mount Miyaboku and thus has the ability to summon a variety of toads, of which he can use for various different purposes. Some of them though have certain specific jutsu that fall under later sections, so for this section specifically, I'll just go over the most relevant toads he has at his disposal and the physical feats that they've performed. But what exactly are summons though? The summoning jutsu is a kind of space-time ninjutsu that allows the user to summon any living being with whom they've signed a blood contract with at any time and place they desire. The summoned creature will obey the master with its lie of helping in every situation, whether it be fighting or fleeing. The user smears their own blood on the hand they signed the contract with and needs chakra by doing hand seals. Then by turning the palm of the hand to the place that they want to summon, they call forth a subordinate they can rely on. The first time we see Jiraiya use the jutsu is in his debut chapter all the way back in chapter 90, where he summons Gamma against Ebisu after getting caught peeping at the hot springs. He doesn't have much time and doesn't have much screen time, however he is shown to be able to block an attack from Kisame, who is considered one of the stronger members of the Akatsuki. Gamabunta is probably the most iconic summon of both Naruto and Jiraiya, and is arguably the strongest one when talking about pure physical strength and speed. After being summoned by Naruto against Gaara, we see Gamabunta pull off feats such as slicing the arm off of Shukaku, the one-tailed beast, and counter his air bullets with his own water bullets. Something that gets overlooked, however, is the fact that Shukaku fired off 5 bullets and only 1 went through, which means that one of Gamabunta's water bullets are equivalent to 2 of Shukaku's. He's also able to technically temporarily restrain the full 9 tails via sitting on his head, but that doesn't really upscale him. The last and certainly not least is the duo pair of Fukasaku and Shima, more commonly known as Ma and Pa. Neither of them have shown much physical feats as they aren't really physical fighters, but we do know that they should be both masters of Senjutsu and users of Sage Mode, so things such as lifting large boulders and frog kata should be techniques under their belt. There is this one other summon that Jiraiya has, though it is kind of unconventional since it doesn't summon a whole toad, he just summons their esophagus. The Toad Mouthtrap, or Gamaguchi Shibari, summons the esophagus and stomach walls of giant toads from Mount Miyaboku. The enemy is trapped inside an inescapable elastic chamber sealed in by fleshy walls that react instantly to Jiraiya's commands. This chamber was strong enough to force Itachi to use his Amaterasu to escape, which is significant since Amaterasu takes a huge toll on his body, and if he could have used a weaker attack to escape, then he would have just done that. It's also noted that the innards of the frog that gets summoned is fireproof, and Jiraiya is surprised that it got burned, which sort of implies that unless you have a Amaterasu level fire, you're not burning yourself through it. But before I forget, I do also want to mention the other toads like Gamakin and Gamahiro, who Jiraiya should have access to, and they did pretty good against paid summons. Now at this point it gets a bit tricky to structure the video because, as I said earlier, there is a lot of overlap, but I figure since we're already talking about toads, I'd cover the most iconic technique he got from Mount Miyaboku, that being his Sage Mode. Jiraiya's Sage Mode is a bit different from the other users in Naruto, which I'll touch on in a second, but he does get his own databook entry. A Toad Lion warrior brimming with divinity who wields Senjutsu that surpasses ninjutsu. The style of Senjutsu displayed by Jiraiya during his decisive battle with pain. Jiraiya summons the two great sage toads of Mount Miyeboku, and by borrowing their powers, he absorbs a huge amount of nature energy into his body. By blending it with his chakra, he's able to dramatically increase the level of ninjutsu, taijutsu, genjutsu, durability, and recovery speed. Sage mode makes the use of Senjutsu possible, and when combining with the two great sage toads, he truly enters the realm of a sage. The only caveat though, and this is what I was talking about earlier, is that Jiraiya can't use sage mode on his own. After summoning Ma and Pa, Fukasaku tells Jiraiya that he's gotta start being able to go into sage mode by himself, and Jiraiya tells him that he's still a baby in swaddling clothes compared to the two of them. This shouldn't really be a problem, however, since to maximally use Sage mode, you're gonna need Ma and Pa either way, and this is because even though Jiraiya can't use Sage mode by himself, his workaround is infinitely more efficient. Pa explains to Naruto that since the principle of entering Sage mode is to not move, you become an easy target for the enemy unless you have a lot of comrades to help. So if you have to go into Sage mode by yourself, you have to withdraw from the battle in order to gather nature energy. However, you can circumvent this problem by merging your body with the Sage Toads, splitting the roles of stillness and action, where the Toads stay still and gather nature energy while the Sage user fights. And in Jiraiya's case, the final form of his Sage mode had both Ma and Pa riding on his shoulders. Now, as it relates to Sage mode specific abilities, Jiraiya should have access to Kawazu or Frog Kumite and its sub-technique Frog Kata. Jiraiya's Taijutsu gets a massive boost from Sage mode, and it's really put on display in his fight against Pain, where he's able to completely blitz one of the paths with a kick straight to the face. Later on in the fight, he does something similar where he lands a kick on another path that carries so much power, he caused the path to cough up blood. He should also be, as I said, proficient in Frog Kata. It's described as a terrific taijutsu that ones who learn Senjutsu mastered. By turning into Sage mode, the user reaches a point of being able to take in natural energy and the power of perception is expanded. With it, you can sense the movements of opponent to the point of releasing an intense counterattack that matches the enemy's attack. Furthermore, the energy becomes part of the user's body, and both the range and power of the attack rises. It's a flawless taijutsu that has no openings either in attack or defense. But to put it simply, when in Sage mode, Jiraiya is able to control the nature energy that exists all around and use it as an extension of his limbs to attack his opponents without making contact, just like Naruto. Now, the final ability that Jiraiya gains while using Sage mode is the Odama Rasengan, which should be in the next category. Why is it here? I have no idea who did this. I'm the one who did this. The Odama or Massive Rasengan is described as a storm that rages in the palm of the hand, slicing through the air, swallowing everything in its path. The Massive Rasengan is a Rasengan with increased chakra, and in Sage mode, Jiraiya is able to dramatically increase their size by adding nature energy. The ball of energy that is formed creates a huge whirlwind storm that, when unleashed, can easily carve away a mountain. Whether or not that is true at all, I'll simply leave up to you. Now, since we've gone over Jiraiya's Sage mode specific abilities, let's get into the other Senjutsu techniques that he has that may not be directly related to his Sage mode, but he only has access to or only uses when he's in Sage mode. The first of which is obviously gonna be Frog Song or Gamma Rincho. Once you hear it, you become captive to an illusion, a duet of death. After invoking Sage mode, the husband and wife toads sing Genjutsu from Jiraiya's shoulders. The exquisite harmony of the two great sage toads married for several hundred years can warp even space. Two or more toads sing in harmony to a musical scale passed down secretly on the Mount Miyeboku. Those who hear it are drawn into a Genjutsu world where their minds are paralyzed, and Gamma Rincho will succeed if the target is even within earshot, but at the risk of giving away your location. Despite that though, even with the drawbacks, the trio decided that this was the best jutsu in their arsenal to use against Pain given their circumstances, and to their fortune it worked. There is a reason why most fans consider Frog Song a one-shot GG, since it's almost completely unavoidable and is potent enough to trap Pain. The reason being that since the Genjutsu is propagated by sound, you can only detect it by sound, and if you detect it, then you're already trapped. And truthfully, Jiraiya would have won here if all paths of Pain were present, since they'd all collectively be put under the Genjutsu, and the same could be said for most other characters in the verse with just a bit of prep. Other techniques in his arsenal include include jutsu such as his Kibari Senbon, which is one of the 3 hair-related jutsu that Jiraiya has in his kit. Like a raging storm, a mountain of needle-like hairs rain down at super speed. Hairs from one's head are hardened and fired at the target one after another. The speed of this attack is the fastest among attacks in Sage mode, and with the Sage Toads invigorating the roots of Jiraiya's hair, even as he fires his chakra-infused Kibari, he can fire a near infinite number of shots. However, he only uses it like once, so there is not much more you can say about it. The same thing can be said about his giant flame bombs, where after filling his mouth with oil created inside his body from Seijutsu chakra, the caster sprays the oil out as he ignites it with fire style. The flames are more than 10 times as large as regular flame bombs, and the jutsu is used to completely seal off the escape route of an enemy that has been quartered in a hall or room. This is exactly how Jiraiya used it against the 3 paths of pain, where he essentially sandwiched them between himself and a shadow clone. Then using the giant flame bombs, he engulfed the hallway in flames, forcing them down into a surprise attack. Last but not least, and this is my favorite Seijutsu from Jiraiya, is the Senpo Goman, or the Bath of Boiling Oil. It's a collaborative fighting technique that Jiraiya uses in Sage mode with the 2 great Sage Toads. After cornering an enemy inside a building or in a depression in the ground, Jiraiya releases oil, Fukasaku unleashes wind style, and Shima unleashes water style in huge quantities. The 3 are able to fill the area with bubbling oil at a temperature of several thousand degrees. And to put that into perspective for you, Jiraiya was able to flood the entire room that he and Pain were in. And if you didn't know, several just means more than 3 but less than many, which means that at a bare minimum that oil is reaching temperatures of at least 3000 degrees, and this is Celsius since it's Japan, which for the record is hot enough to melt steel, and depending on how you push the word several, you can get it to 5000 degrees, which is around the temperature of the surface of the sun. So either way you slice it, most people are not surviving this. Now, just like his student Minato, Jiraiya is no slouch when it comes to barrier techniques and seals. Jiraiya was able to instantly undo the 5-prong seal that Orochimaru placed on Naruto, which we don't really know how powerful it is, so that doesn't really mean anything. But hey, this is about versatility, not power. As it relates to barrier techniques though, he has like 4 of them. The first is the Kekai barrier, Gamahiro, described as a gourd filled with silence and fear, a sealed dimension from which there is no escape. The caster summons the gourd toad Gamahyoton, who lives in Mount Miyaboku, then drags the target into the toad's stomach, where a sealed dimension isolated from the outside world exists. It's also possible to melt one's adversary by shoving him into a lake of acid, as evidenced by the path of pain that Jiraiya dragged in. The second is the Tengai perimeter barrier, a wide-range battle tactic that detects anyone who enters, a jutsu that sets a sphere-shaped detection barrier with the caster at its center. At the caster's will, the barrier can be expanded to the size of an entire space. The caster is then able to feel the activities of those existing inside the barrier through his senses. The third is the Gamagakure Jutsu, an infiltration jutsu where one invades from the water, hiding inside a toad's mouth. The caster summons a diving toad from Mount Miyaboku and conceals himself inside of it. In freshwater, the toad can dive to depths of up to 228 feet, making this a particularly effective means of infiltrating enemy camps surrounded by lakes and rivers. The inside of the toad is a barrier space that blocks chakra, and thus it can protect the caster from being detected by sensory ninjutsu. The fourth and final jutsu is the Toad Shop Jutsu, where he summons a shop toad from Mount Miyaboku and seals an enemy inside of it. The shop toad can transform itself into any architectural structure, and the caster uses chakra to mold it into the design and specs of his choosing. Jiraiya used this to trap the 2 men in the Rain Village by, funnily enough, luring them in with the bait of all you can drink for 500 Ryo. Now this is gonna be for all the jutsu that don't fall under any other specific category, so I'll just go over them quickly. The first is the Toad Subjugation Art of the Manipulated Shadow, which is broken for no particular reason. After casting his chakra onto the target's shadow, the caster then makes his body as thin as possible to merge with the subject's shadow and temporarily take away the target's ability to control their mind and body. While using the jutsu, the caster must hold his breath and is still able to speak to the target it, but when the caster resumes breathing, the jutsu is cancelled. This is genuinely broken, since imagine getting into a fight with Jiraiya and he just turns into your shadow and makes you unalive yourself. Next is the other two hair jutsus he has in his arsenal, his Needle Jizo and Raging Lion's Mane. He's able to protect himself and bind both Konan and Pain respectively with these techniques, but there's not much more to say about them. He also has the Fire Release Flame Bullet he used on Konan, the Toad Oil Bullet he also used on Konan, the Toad Oil Flame Bullet that he used in conjunction with Gamabunta. He has the Dark Swamp Jutsu used against Orochimaru snakes, however he can also cast it on walls and ceilings to trap opponents like what he did against Pain. And last but not least, my personal favorite jutsu in Jiraiya's arsenal, the Turn It Into a Toad Jutsu. This is by far the funniest jutsu he has, based solely on the fact that it's literally just the transformation jutsu. It's not some secret transfiguration, he just casts the transformation jutsu on you, turning you into a frog, which he then uses to intimidate your comrades. But with that being said, that's pretty much it for the video. Make sure to like and subscribe and become a channel member. Like, please just support your boy. Or don't. No, I won't hunt you down or anything. Maybe. Anyways, catch y'all in the next one. Bye, B.